DC Today starts right now. Good Friday morning and welcome to DC Today. I'm Del Walters. You all know the saying, he who laughs first laughs last. But is that true in presidential politics? After all, who can forget this moment at the White House Correspondents' Dinner when then President Obama joked about the presidential aspirations of one Donald Trump?
Donald Trump is here tonight. No one is happier, no one is prouder to put this birth certificate matter to rest than the Donald. And that's because he can finally get back to focusing on the issues that matter. Like, did we fake the moon landing? What really happened in Roswell? And where are Biggie and Tupac?
So was that a precursor to this, that crisis brought on by the man who some then saw as a joke, who they now say actually threatens the very fabric of our democracy, that insurrection that we saw on January 6th? A little later in our broadcast, we'll talk to Valerie Jarrett, the former senior White House advisor in the Obama years. We'll talk about politics, we'll talk about race and the politics of race. But first, that unfinished business in Tulsa, the nation's painful past and its present, coming head to head in Tulsa. Tulsa was historic in two ways, President Biden becoming the first U.S. president to go there and actually acknowledge that a massacre took place. He talked about bridging the racial wealth gap, but made no mention of reparations.
We never got to the point where we actually were able to seek relief or a remedy because we were thrown out of court very early on because of the deadline. But I think that we need to really listen hard and ask that question to the survivors and the descendants themselves. I feel like they have the answers. There are a ton of things that we can do. I think it's a matter of political will, right? I do think that lawmakers can tomorrow, they don't have to have a statute of limitations. So, you know, they have the power to eliminate that. We know Congress has that power. We know that the courts have the power to exercise discretion if there are statute of limitations for equitable reasons or justice, and to give the survivors and their descendants the give them the agency, right, that they deserve. They get to decide, what does that look like? Does it look like a scholarship fund? Does it look like health care? Does it look like investing back into the community? Does it look like restitution? And so they need to be the primary leaders and beneficiaries of whatever efforts are made going forward.
So that was on our airwaves last night. So what happens next? Black voters push Joe Biden over the finish line. Is this part of that check, that bill due that they should put on the table? Kelly Hyman is a Democratic strategist. She joins us now from Denver. Our Republican strategist, Chris Metzler, is in Miami. And Dr. Laura McNeil, our chief legal correspondent, joins us now from our headquarters. Dr. McNeil, Tulsa, presenting a challenge now to Black America, getting what it wants, but also knowing how to demand action. Your thoughts?
Yes, you know, I think that this is 100 years past due in terms of making sure that the descendants of this horrific 14-hour massacre receive their just due. One thing interesting about the field of law, we have a term called restitution, and the purpose of restitution is to restore those victims of a crime, victims of harm, back to where they would have been but for the harm. And that's all that this lawsuit is asking for in terms of reparations, to correct the wrongs, to restore this generational wealth that was essentially robbed from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Tulsa residents.
Chris, you know the old saying, ask not, get not. If this were a Republican president, what would Black America's strategy look like when demanding the issue of reparations, specifically with regards to what we saw in Tulsa?
Well, I think if it were a Republican president, certainly it could have been brought up. But it most likely would have gotten nowhere, largely because what Republicans have done is pretty much politicize the issue of reparations. As Dr. Laura correctly indicated, it is the but-for doctrine here. And that harm was in fact visited on the residents of Tulsa and their descendants. And so it is simply a matter of making them whole because that was the intervening disaster, so to speak. But if it were a Republican president, it would not, they can bring up whatever strategy they want. It would not have occurred because fundamentally Republicans don't believe in reparations.
So, Kelly, I hear somewhere out there the ghost from our civil rights past saying, if not now, when? Because with regards to Tulsa, is this the place where Black America should plant its flag? And I'm thinking about all of the elections past and most recent in which Black Americans say, we put you over the top, but we didn't get anything. Is this the place where Black America should plant its flag?
Absolutely, they should. Black Lives Matter. My thoughts and prayers go out to anyone affected by the Tulsa massacre, and my hats go off to Biden to say, went there and said that this was a massacre. Absolutely, they should have their day in court, and they're entitled to justice, and they're entitled to compensation. They put Biden over the line, and they made him our president, and so now is the time for them, and Black Lives Matter.
Dr. Laura, I know as an investigative reporter, if I were to go out there and really dig into the issue of what happened on Black Wall Street, I could find the people who were responsible. Is this a case where the legal system really doesn't want to know who it is that should be put on trial, in this case, for mass murder in the United States?
You know, it's one of those things where you're right. It'd be very easy to track down through a lineage search the descendants of the people, the victims of the Tulsa massacre. But it's really a shameful part of our American history that we've seen they have tried to bury for years. I mean, the Tulsa massacre was not even taught in my history books. I found out about them as an adult, as my parents, again, were trying to inform me about some of the dark parts of African American history here in America. So I think it's really a shameful part of history, and they've chose to just turn a blind eye for over 100 years, or rather for 100 years, and it's just a matter of not wanting to be held accountable, hoping it will just go away. But the beautiful thing about those strong, brave victims who spoke out in Congress recently, it's not going to go away, and reparations should be given to those individuals. And it's happened before. They did it recently in Manhattan Beach, California. They restored beachfront property that was taken from Black families in 1912. So it's not that it can't be done. There just has to be the will to make it happen.
Well, we will be talking in just a moment about what the Biden administration does want to talk about. They want to talk about the latest jobs numbers that came out. In fact, the president's set to address the nation in about 7 minutes. Stay with us. You're watching BNC. You're watching DC Today. We'll be right back.